Today, I'm going to be ranking the different math topics covered in the SAT using a tier list. If you didn't know, the math SAT is actually divided into different concepts that target specific areas of math. The SAT is actually intentionally organized. Much to the surprise of many, it is not a chaotic demon meant to crush your dreams and see you suffer, as you may have experienced it in high school. To quote College Board, the math section focuses on the areas of math that play the biggest role in college and career success, which may or may not actually be true. There are 4 major areas for the SAT: algebra, advanced algebra, problem solving and data analysis, and geometry and trigonometry, my personal favorite. Each of these have their own subsections, of which I will rank almost all of. I say almost because some of these sections are a little vague, and I really couldn't put a specific question to match some of the topics. If you want to check out the page I referenced for all this though, check out the description. In the description is also a really cool link that you can press to subscribe, which is something I would super appreciate if you did right now. Anyways, let's get on to that tier list. So I did this tier list in Canva. It felt like the easiest and it allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. I'm going to be rating each of these topics based on how fun they are, because yes, I do find math fun, as repulsive as that may sound to some of you watching, and on how easy they are, because one of the most important things about the SAT is getting a good score. And what does that require? It means you're able to answer correctly and you're able to answer quickly. So questions you can get done correctly really fast are very good, but they will lose some points from me if they are boring. At least they should be able to write fun questions, but we know College Board doesn't really care about making this fun. It's about making money. Sorry for blaspheming against you, College Board. Please do not send me to the SAT gulags, please. Anyways, on to the tier list. Our first topic, linear equations in one variable. Here we have an x minus 1 over 3 is equal to k, and k is equal to 3. It's super easy, so I'd be tending to give it a pretty high score. Unfortunately, it is very boring. All you have to do is plug in a 3, and then you just solve for x. It's a very generic algebra question. I don't feel smart completing it. You're just multiplying by 3 on both sides and then adding 1. So I'm going to give this a C tier. It's generic, it's simple, so it deserves a generic position. Its brother is the linear equation in 2 variables, where we have 2 unknowns. This question specifically, you're just plugging in A or B, and it is a little harder. For that reason, I think it is slightly better than a generic linear equation in one variable, so I'll put it up here. Then we have linear functions. I couldn't find an f of x or a function that was linear. The SAT has a lot of functions that are nonlinear, as we will see in a little bit, but I couldn't find a linear one. For these linear functions, you typically just plug in a variable, and then you try to see what answers right. It's fairly simple. It's almost just a rehash of linear equations in one variable. So honestly, the best I can give it is a C. I think they can still be fun, but it's the same thing as a linear equation in one variable. You're just changing some things around, renaming certain things. Then we have linear inequalities in 1 or 2 variables. We have suddenly upped the difficulty quite significantly. I don't know about you, but growing up, when I learned inequalities, I didn't really grasp it as well as other aspects of math, especially in my pre-algebra days. I still struggle to know what side of an inequality I have to color in or shade when I struggle to discern between whole lines for inequalities. I know it's obvious for a lot of people, but not for me. I got this question right when I did my SAT speedrun, but there was another inequality question I got wrong. For that reason, I'm gonna have to put it in the D tier, because above all else, the SAT you want to do well on. And if you get a question you're just likely to get wrong, then it's not that great. So this is the next question type, and also the next topic, equivalent expressions. These tend to be very fun for me. They are like a puzzle, and they don't tend to be too hard. It's usually fairly obvious, and if you know PEMDAS, you're probably going to get this correct. So I'm honestly going to put this in the A tier. Maybe for somebody else, they would get this wrong, but not me. And we have reached one of my favorite math concepts, nonlinear equations in one variable. I love nonlinear equations. I love parabolas. I love cubic functions. I love exponentials. I love them all. And for that reason, I don't care how hard it is. This is S tier for me. Another interesting topic, systems of equations in 2 variables. These tend to be time killers. Unfortunately, whenever you get a systems of equation problem, if you're doing substitution, you're going to be spending maybe over a minute. They tend to be easy to solve because you can verify, usually because you have 2 equations, but because they take so long, I have to put this in the E tier. There have been many times during my SAT runs or my SAT practice that I have just gotten stuck for like a minute or 2 just doing systems of equation problems because you mess up one step during substitution and suddenly it's been 2-3 minutes, and that's just way too much time, especially if you have other problems that are harder. So I have to give it a lower score. And the last chunk here of advanced math is a nonlinear function, which is pretty much identical to nonlinear equations in one variable. So it's an easy S tier for me too. In the same way that I treated linear equations with one variable and linear functions as equivalent, I'll just do the same here, because honestly, nonlinear functions and nonlinear equations are just so fun and so cool. And finally, we are at one of the most applicable sections of the SAT, problem solving and data analysis. If you ever have a job that involves numbers and you have to work with charts or make presentations, or even if you're just running a budget, you're probably going to need to know this. Unfortunately, these also tend to be the longest problems to work with, just because you have a lot to visually look at and a lot to process. If you're tired, or if there's a lot of information, then you're going to take extra long on these, even if they are super easy. So we have ratios, rates, proportional relationships, and units. That's a mouthful. These tend to be any form of units that you have to do conversions. Here we have 1 decagram is equal to 10 grams, and 1,000 milligrams is equal to 1 gram. I remember this question, we wanted to find how many milligrams were in 2 decagrams. It's a fairly easy one. It's just a conversion, multiplication really. It does require you to know ratios and proportional relationships. I think it's pretty fun. It's pretty easy. I'll give it a B. If it were a little bit more challenging, I would have considered an A. I wouldn't put it in an S though. It's not challenging enough and it's not cool enough. It does not pass the vibe check. So here we have the percentages section. These questions are hit or misses because they can either be insanely hard to understand like this question, or they can be super easy and just be a simple 20% increased over another number. This question on the SAT consumed like 3 to 5 minutes of my time during my speed run. It was actually awful how much time I spent on this, and I still don't know how to answer it. I should really go through and look through this again, but I had to guess. And questions that are this hard and this complicated just suck. I'm going to give this, unfortunately, I'm putting it in the F tier. As much as I love them normally, on the SAT, they are my demon. Anyways, on to a happier note. One variable data, distributions, and measures of center and spread. These will be questions that ask you about like the mean, median, or mode, or the range of a chart or of a set of values. In this case, we have the lengths of fish. I think these are pretty easy. These are pretty fun. If it takes you a second to even remember what a median is, these questions might be a little bit more difficult. But because I like these questions and I just like looking at data in general, this is going to be A tier for me. Then we also have 2 variable data, models, and scatterplots. If there is something with data that I absolutely do love, it is charts. I love charts. I love line charts. I love bar charts. I love scatter plots. I don't even care what question this is. This is going in S tier. The next one is a doozy. Probability and conditional probability. This section is going to be naturally hard for a lot of people. It's easy to do generic probabilities like what is the probability you're going to land heads on a coin. But when it comes to these types of tables, it can get really confusing really fast and very time consuming. Lucky for me, I understand it. So for that reason, I'm going to rank it high both on enjoyment and easiness. But for a lot of other people, this might be one of the questions that they just have to skip. For me, I'll just end up giving this a B tier. And the final question for this section on data is inference from sample statistics and margin of error. Essentially, we need to look at data and extrapolate some information from that. This question specifically asks us to find in general how much earthworms we can expect throughout the entire surface based on 10 regions. If there are 100 total regions and we're looking only at 10, we should be able to extrapolate that information. I like this. It feels like a puzzle. However, when I came across this the first time, I had to continue to reread the problem because I did not know what was going on. There's a lot of information, and because it requires you to do one step beyond just looking at the data and answering something, I have to put it in the D tier with inequalities. It just doesn't measure up to the lengths of fish or scatterplots. Nothing can ever measure up to scatterplots. Nothing. I love scatterplots. And so our last section now is geometry and trigonometry, concepts I just adore in math. Area and volume formulas are probably one of the most enjoyable sections on the SAT for me. I love coming across polygons and 3D objects and just having to solve for their volume. I find these types of problems fascinating, and I love just being able to remember the area of circles and then just solve for it. If you have the areas and the volumes memorized, it's super easy and it's super fun. S tier. Next we have lines, angles, and triangles. When I took geometry in high school, I did not like proofs back then. I do like proofs now, but lines, angles, and triangles were the bane of my existence in 9th grade, and I still have some of that grief from all the suffering I endured during that time, and a lot of pain that I have not let go. And for that reason, I'm going to put this in the F tier. This is my small way of getting revenge on what angles did to me in 9th grade. Next, we have a lovely topic, right triangles and trigonometry. And now I know I just said that angles really ruined my life in 9th grade, but when I really got into trigonometry in the latter half of high school, I really fell in love. And when I got into the higher levels of math and I was working through calculus, I really fell in love with trigonometry. So when I came across this question, and I saw how easy it was to solve if you know the trig tricks, I was very happy. I love trigonometry, and they tend to be super easy questions, so I'm going to give this an S. And on to the final thing to rate on the tier list. In the true depth of my heart, I love areas, I love volumes, I love shapes, I love polygons. One thing I have never been really great at doing is to find the equation of a circle based on the center and an endpoint of the circle. I got this question wrong on my SAT speedrun. And overall, I just struggle with these types of questions. Sometimes they're easy, sometimes they're harder like this one. And while I do love circles, typically not like this. And for that reason, I have to put it in the E tier as much as it hurts my heart. And so here we have the tier list finished. You may notice that it's very top heavy. There's a lot of things in the S, A, and B tier. A lot of that has to do with just the size of the images I put there. But also it's just that I love a lot of math concepts and that many of the topics on the SAT are really just fun and easy. Some of them are hard and some of them have caused me a lot of grief. But overall, they're wonderful questions that are fun to go through, and that's why I do what I do. If I didn't enjoy going through the SAT, I wouldn't be making videos on questions on the SAT. So yes, this is biased. I do like a lot of the questions on the SAT, but it's not because of the SAT. It's because I love math. And I hope that one day, if you don't currently love math, that you will be able to love it too, because it truly is one of the most beautiful fields that we humans could ever interface with. And if you're not there now, I hope you will be in the future. Thank you for watching. I hope it was remotely entertaining, and I heavily recommend you check out the SAT speedrun that inspired me to make this. If you're not so interested in the SAT, you should check out my playthrough of Infinite Craft, where I tried to create math topics. It's a very nice video, and I would greatly appreciate if you checked out either. Regardless, I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day.